Welcome to Legacy Collection Chat, a brand new series which aims to provide you with a deep dive into the Mattel Legacy Collection and the origins of this prestigious line. I'm your host for this series, Tom Jurassic, and with me today is the man himself, JC.
Hey guys, how's it going?
My favourite thing about this is our third time recording and you've done a different introduction every time.
Well, I do try.
I like it. I like the variety. So today, if this recording survives, we will be talking about the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So the Tyrannosaurus Rex is synonymous with the Jurassic franchise, with some even referring to her as the Queen of Nublar. In this episode, we are going to take a look at the Extreme Chompin Tyrannosaurus Rex, the first version of Rexy to join the Legacy Collection assortment. This animal retailed for around $19.99 when it first released, again being available as a Smith's exclusive, although it also appeared on other resellers later in its life cycle at a slightly higher price point. It aimed to capture the iconic colour scheme seen in the first film, with shadowing around the face and an orangey tan colour scheme throughout the figure. Subsequent versions have been released, including a recolour of the Sculpt and also the inclusion of the same Sculpt in the Ford Explorer pack. But for this video we are looking specifically at that very first Legacy Collection figure. So, JC, I know that your Mattel collection is a lot more limited, but obviously this is a very iconic animal. So was this one that you went out and tracked down immediately on launch day in 2018?
Yes, this is one I got as soon as I could from Smith's Toys. I believe it appeared around the same time or shortly after the Jeep Wrangler. Yeah. And I was gripped by the hype of the Legacy line, I have to be honest.
You're spot on that this was on shelves at exactly the same time as the Legacy Collection Wrangler as well, so it was quite cool seeing obviously a T-Rex on the shelves and then also a Jurassic Park Jeep kind of together. And
so
that
iconic.
Is yeah, exactly. So that is, I guess a question that I haven't put here, but it would be nice to ask you, is how for you did it feel seeing that kind of iconic animal back on the shelf? Because obviously you've had the Jurassic World line at this point, but that I feel played a lot more into the modern reinterpretation of the franchise with things like the Raptor Squad front and centre, and obviously the Indominus Rex as well. So how was it walking in and seeing like this icon of Jurassic Park in her own packaging?
Yeah, amazing. It was amazing to see her back again, but not only that, to see this new packaging style for the classic Jurassic Park content. It was just great to see it back. And I mean, we always knew the fan base was there because, you know, Jurassic World paid homage to that. So it made sense that it was back. But just seeing it physically in the stores, it always kind of, you know, caught my eye. I was like, oh wow, look at that, you know, just amazing.
It kind of solidifies that it's back as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You're like, okay, there's something tangible that I can touch. That's a part of this franchise as well, which is really cool.
I think it was a risk for Mattel because there was no guarantee that kids would be necessarily into that content at that point in time. You know, there was no film to go along with it. They were just hoping that enough people had returned to the original film because of the effect of Jurassic World. And that paid off. So that was really cool.
That's a really good observation, actually. So obviously the toy itself is very, very unique in its own right. So I wanted to ask, what do you think about this rendition? And how accurate is its colour scheme when you compare it to the film?
Well, I really love the Sculpt first and foremost.
You
have to remember that we've been through the dark days of the Jurassic Park 3 and Jurassic World Hasbro lines with accuracy.
Well, you've been through the dark days of those lines. I haven't, thankfully.
Right, so you were fortunate, but the accuracy wavered on those very memorable dinosaurs. So it looks like they'd taken advantage of the detail that rapid prototyping and 3D printing affords, packing in some really nice details, especially on the head sculpt. And the paint job reminds me more of like the young T-Rex in terms of its colour scheme from the Kenner line in 1993, rather than being film accurate. And I don't know if that's a kind of a conscious choice to make it feel more nostalgic as a toy. But it is also a difficult paint scheme to capture accurately and cost effectively. It also kind of has the feeling of almost being like one tone. If you looked at it in the box, it could be kind of all brown across. So I understand why they've kind of punched up the saturation of the colour scheme. But yeah, by doing that, it does appear reminiscent of the young T-Rex from the Kenner line.
So this was something we were talking about before the show, and it's not a question that we had pre-planned for this episode, but I think it's worth asking. Are there any other versions you've seen from Mattel since then that you feel are closer to that original T-Rex?
Yeah, there's the one they did to tie in with Fallen Kingdom, which I believe was an Extreme Chomping one as well, but it had a sort of a darker, more saturated brown colour scheme, and I think it's also around the eye area, which is something that fans bring up a lot, the sort of shadowing around the eye. I think James Hawkins from Jurassic Unicast is often talking about that, and
Make
I
sure
think
to go and subscribe to them.
It's definitely, and it's a good observation. The contrast of that eye area. It's not just all based on the shadowing. There is actually, when you watch Jurassic Park, there is a sort of shadowy area around the eye, which I think was probably a note from Stan Winston, because if you look at makeup monster effects around the 80s, you see a lot of that contrast around the eye area to make the kind of contact lenses in the monster effects really pop. So that was obviously something that he carried over from his monster makeup knowledge, and it got transferred over to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So it is something that's important to the look of old Rexy.
That's really cool to think about, actually, and the fact that that's sort of almost a part of, in a way, her branding, I suppose.
Absolutely, really, it's her identity.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got the more recent Dino Escape version, which is the version that I think I have on display. I feel like maybe I'm looking at my shelf, and maybe it's not the version I've got on display, actually. I think I've got the classic Legacy version on display.
Right.
But the Dino Escape version was a lot darker, and it had like the tan underbelly, a lot of shadowing around the eyes. And that to me really felt like a version that depicted Rexy as she appears in the Breakout, where obviously the colours are a lot darker, a lot more muted anyway, because of the fact that that's at night time. So it's interesting to me when it comes to these toys, thinking about the fact that actually you could have several different iterations of the same animal based on when you see her in the film as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, because I mean, if you've seen the actual paint scheme of the animatronic raptors in Jurassic Park, their colour scheme is much browner and lighter, and much less saturated than they appear in the film. In the film, they come across as almost like a dull grey, greeny lizard colour. But that's not how they are actually painted on the animatronic puppets. So it's interesting to see the effect of harsh lighting and camera angles where you don't get to see them, full on, and all those details. So it's just interesting to see how the lighting of the film has affected our interpretation of their colour scheme.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually. You don't think about it, but actually, even the colour choices that you see on screen are affected by the way that that's shot, the way that that's lit, all of those kinds of things. So it's very, very hard to get to that sort of classic colour scheme, isn't it? Because maybe the classic colour scheme you remember isn't actually how it looked on set. And I feel like we're straying very close to some quite contentious territory in the community. So we should probably leave that conversation there.
Yeah, sounds good.
So you mentioned that this figure looks very, very similar to the Kenner juvenile T-Rex. But are there any other Kenner figures which you would say that this reminds you of?
I guess it reminds me a little bit of the larger Rexes from Kenner Series 1, and also the Thrasher Rex from The Lost World, just in terms of its appearance. But
yeah,
I would say that in terms of the colour scheme, at least, it's very reminiscent of that Junior Rex from Series 1 for me.
Yeah, that's cool. And what do you think about the chomping play feature with that? Was there anything in any of the classic Rex figures which were similar to that? Because obviously I know the Red Rex, for example, it's well known for the dino damage and the real feel rubber. So were like chomping features anything that was present in any of the Kenner lines, or is that more sort of the creation of the modern toy industry, if you like?
No, it did have a raw feature. I think when you squeeze the chest on the Red Rex, it did actually open its jaws. What I like about this new one is the extremity of the jaw openness, and obviously that, hence the name. But it really does cut a striking silhouette with its jaws wide open. I think the tongue remaining centered does appear a bit off. It looks a bit almost like a snake or an animal that you've been strangling really hard, and its tongue is like sticking out.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be better if that tongue stayed with the lower jaw just for that silhouette. But I think the fact that Mattel got this mechanism working so well is highly impressive.
You make a really interesting observation, because that tongue is actually a variation. So the initial assortment of figures, and indeed the Rex that I've got, have the tongue that stays sticking out as it roars.
Right.
And then subsequent sculpts, so the one that's in the Ford Explorer set, and also the repaint version that you touched on, the tongue does go down with the jaw. And it also has like a real feel rubber quality to it now as well.
Oh, nice. Well, that's good then. So they've obviously improved on that, because I think it does stand out. It almost looks like it's being cartoony choked like Bart Simpson.
yeah, I get that.
But it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of really brings it to a close when it comes to talking about this figure. Mm-hmm. I guess just to really round it out, so obviously we've spoken a little bit about what it was like to see it on shelves. Mm-hmm. But obviously I think that this is very different to, say for example, the Hasbro line again, because the offerings there were very different. You had like your big scale 35-pound T-Rex that wasn't particularly accurate, and then your like £15 single card packs, very different pricing. So I guess obviously being somebody who collected during the Kenner days when big toys were a lot more prevalent, and then going through sort of the shift in the toy industry, I would say we've seen where pricing has gone up and the size of toys has come down. Did it almost feel like a renaissance, I want to say, in 2018 when you went into a store and saw a big Rex again for £20?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it felt like I think accuracy was the thing I was most impressed by, like the skull shape. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And it was impressive to me that so much care had been invested in something related to Jurassic Park. It surprised me that someone had put in effort to make this thing look good, because I felt like we were on a slippery slope with Jurassic Park toys, and we'd had the heyday of the 90s and things were kind of, declining, and each time the toy line was subsequently worse and cheaper made. But actually, this was like a ray of hope for those who collected that sort of stuff. And actually, for me, I was mainly collecting this legacy line, so for me that was the fun part. But it gave me hope that actually the toy line was in safe hands, and that actually for children of the future, they're going to have an exciting time comparable to what we did when Jurassic Park came out.
Yeah, and I'm sure the children of the future never imagined that they would get a legacy collection Roland Tembo to hunt down their T-Rex.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So certainly a very, very cool time to be alive, I would say. Yeah, well, do you have any closing thoughts before I bring us into the introduction? Not the introduction, the outro even.
Yeah, I think it's just great work by Mattel all round. I think they should really be proud of themselves for getting this off the ground. I think it's something that fans have wanted for a long time in one kind of shape or another.
Yeah.
I still think there's an opening for something that is very close to the Kenner toy, And I think if they capitalise on that, that's like a whole nother line that they could do, similar to the Legacy line.
So, would you say a real field toy, or would you say that something like, oh, I don't know, potentially a super articulated Hammond collection T-Rex would be quite popular?
I think it would.
It's almost as if I'm hinting towards something, isn't it? But not quite. Not quite there.
Sounds very exciting.
So on that note, that is really it for this episode on the Queen of Nublar. Obviously, it's quite ironic that we're talking about one of the most iconic animals, one of the most iconic toys, and this is probably our shortest episode yet. But we really want to make sure that we're keeping these discussions to a good quality, and actually we're not prolonging them. You know, we just want to reflect on these things honestly, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that, and you'll enjoy the varying length in the episodes depending on what we're talking about as well. So as I say, that is it for this episode of Legacy Collection Chat. Stay tuned to Jurassic Collectibles across social media for more episodes of Legacy Collection Chat throughout 2022 as we approach the release of Jurassic World Dominion. You can also find me at Tom Jurassic across social media. And JC, why don't you sign us off?
So make sure you rate, comment and subscribe, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode of Legacy Chat.